Yes, the reason that I asked not to mention it was just because we've made a trailer for it. Is there sound though? Yeah?
In this playground of immortality, the preservation of experience has taken hold of our existence. We're able to stay connected even when hiding from one another. The illusion of companionship without the demands of relationships. We choose to text rather than talk. Where we are but simulations, we cannot be ourselves. These simulations blur the lines between fiction and reality. And when they permeate back into our lives, they obscure the sense of ourselves and of one another. Where both spectator and spectacle inhabit this blurred reality, eroding individuality and the sanctity of consciousness. Because we've grown up with technology, we assume technology has grown up too. We're being isolated as it continues to progress. And as we've never been taught how to be alone, we only know how to be lonely. The distinction between physical reality and its simulation is blurring. And if our consciousness is experienced through the perception of sight and sound, through interaction, through technology, and through our conception of knowledge, to what extent is it really our own?
Okay, yeah. So for 24 hours a day, for 28 days, I'll be wearing a virtual reality headset with sound-cancelling headphones, through which I'll just see and hear what someone else is seeing and hearing for that time. So that person will be wearing a pair of glasses with 3 lenses built into them with binaural audio. And yeah, I'll be seeing kind of first-person perspective of that person. I will shower and go to the toilet whenever that person does, and I will also eat the same food as him and drink when and whatever he does. That's to allow for complete isolation. Otherwise, I'm free to do as I please. So here, this was from, like a 30-hour test run we did. So I'd had the whole day, slept, and then woke up, and I was bored, so I was running because he was running. But I'm completely free to do as I wish. So this other person, well, let's talk about eating. So at the moment, I have to be fed because I can't actually see where the food is or where the plate is. But we're working with an Israeli company who will put little red dots on the screen, kind of like augmented reality, but not quite, to kind of guide me to the food or the toilet. So this other person, I don't know anything about them. All I know is that they're a heterosexual male over the age of 21 and that they're living with their girlfriend or wife. Over the age of 21 for legal reasons. Heterosexual male because I am a heterosexual male and I wanted to be a woman for quite a while. But hormonally and biologically we're just too different for it to sync up over 28 days, if that's at all possible. And living with his partner because if you live alone, you'll walk out of your flat, you'll walk down the stairs, you'll walk to the bus, you'll get on the bus, and I'm constantly guessing what you're doing. But if you live with your partner, you'd say, I'm going to the shop to buy some milk, do you want anything? No, I'm okay, I'll be back in 20 minutes, and I know what you're doing. Also, sex, because this is a test, this is an experiment of mind over body. And sex is the physical thing that will bring you back out of this virtual world, so to speak. And it is emotional, psychological, and physical. So, this is going to be open to the public. So people will get to see me 24 hours a day, 28 days, if you're in London. And if not, there'll be a stream of me there so you can see me. But, I'm not going to want to be masturbating in front of everyone. So it's the first it's the first public bit we can see if I've lost my awareness of my surroundings or my sense of self, so to speak, and whether I do start to believe that I am this person. So in this test run here, there was one point where I started mimicking his behavior without realizing, and that was when he was playing Grand Theft Auto, and I just started going, poo, 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 poo. And yeah, but there's been other ones in other test runs we've done, but this is the footage that I'm showing you here, I guess. So yeah, this will be public. I will be in a room, which I'll show you in a second, with a glass wall dividing me from everyone else, which has a shower, bed, bath, toilet, the necessities. Otherwise, that's it. In the front, there'll be talks going on twice a day and workshops, talks and issues we'll get to later. And there'll be a kitchen on display so everyone can see the food being prepared, editing suite in the basement, and 6 self-contained flats above so everything's self-contained and everything's in the premises. This is where I started mimicking his behavior. So this is kind of just the floor plan of the place. So yeah, I'm at the back in kind of, that section, and yeah. So it's currently going under a lot of work. So yeah, I'm talking the future tense, because this is planned to happen in October. We're sourcing funding, we're still sourcing funding. We've got some funding from various places. But so this is kind of what the place looks like at the moment. It's gutted and starting again to make it look how we want it to look. So one of the people who funded us so far was Imagine Science Film Festival in Abu Dhabi, and that was sponsored by New York University. So the first initial thing is making the glasses that the person's going to wear. And we've now started developing the actual ones, but I'm only showing you a picture of the head mount because we can't really show that. So this is kind of just to give you an idea, but it is glasses, and it's quite hidden. So there's 3 lenses built into them, which are wide-angle lenses, but they're portrait. So it gives you a 180-degree field of view up and down, and with the 3 lenses at 32 degrees apart, it gives you a 180-degree field of view that way. Because the Oculus Rift, which we're using at the moment, only gives you a 90-degree field of view, so you can look around, and you've kind of got the illusion of some autonomy, so to speak. So there's lots of people doing research into what will happen to me. So this is kind of just an example of the footage that we're doing. It's stitched together much better than this is, but this was kind of just to show you how it works a little bit. There's brain plasticians, neuroscientists, cognitive behavioral therapists, philosophers, psychiatrists, psychologists, all doing research into what will happen to me and what are the effects into their specific field of things. But I do see this as an open-sourced research project, and I invite anyone and everyone to do research into me. Because, when is someone going to, for use of a less derogatory word, when is someone going to be naive enough to do this for 28 days? So let's actually see what the effects of this are on people. Why isn't that slide playing? There it is. It's an open research project. So a professor from University of Hamburg, is monitoring my movements to see how the two correlate over the time, as well as tracking my eyes. And so I've been seeing a psychologist now for just over a year. He's been making a character profile of me. I actually strongly recommend everyone see a psychologist, because, everyone else talking about themselves. And we'll see what I'm like before and then after and how it's changed, and hopefully help with my rehabilitation. I guess the really big question is, why am I doing this? So when I thought of this, there's lots of different reasons, and the gallery director, for example, has different reasons to why I'm doing it. But for me, there's 2 big reasons in the sense of, for me, it's about the sense of self, and what is a self, if that's at all possible, and how different are the two. How different am I to you? And is there something inherent about me specifically, or is it a cultural identity that we take on? So that's the kind of physical. We'll talk a bit about the physical world, I guess. So this is kind of how I see the world in a nutshell, I think. The right-hand side is internet, which we'll get to later, and the left-hand side is the real world, physical world, so to speak. So the people at the top, I think, are the establishment, but the establishment using Owen Jones's definition, who's a writer for The Guardian, which is the people who are protecting their own interests, and whether they have a negative knock-on effect or not, that isn't the primary focus. They aren't inherently bad, it's just sometimes bad things happen, but they are protecting their fundamental interests. That kind of goes with media, and it kind of goes bankers, and then I think politicians and politics, which are a good thing, are just below, kind of above autonomy, and then you get to society. And what we think is socially acceptable and law kind of go hand in hand. And recently, over the past 100 years, we see a shift where what we think is socially acceptable is now starting to feed into legality, as opposed to the other way around. And then ethics, what we think is right. Education, the way that we see it in, the structure of education. So if you're in England, you go to school from your 4 till 18, you're told that science, maths, English are very important, and we get taught those kind of things. And then wealth, and this idea of wealth. And, once you're past the necessities of needing accommodation, food, heating, those kind of things, we still want more. And the London riots, I think, are something quite good example in this, so in London in 2011, there were riots and people were protesting, and lots of people say they're riots. I say they're protesting, because obviously they were. They were people from less wealthy backgrounds in council estates around London, all got fed up and started rioting. People were burning stuff, but also people were going and stealing and looting, and the majority were just taking, the big shiny TV that we're constantly told we need to make us happy. They were taking the trainers that this advert said, if you get it, then you'll be happy for the rest of your life. It's kind of this idea that, yeah, we are autonomous, I guess, but actually it's drilled into us that we need more. So then you kind of come into culture, and I think that's where actually you begin, I begin, where actually who you are starts to take place. And I think who we are is the only autonomy that we really have is over taste. The taste of clothes that you have, the taste of music, but also the taste in your interests. So my 3 big interests are art, psychology, and football. Now, if football wasn't made available to me, I wouldn't like football, and I'd probably like something else. And then you kind of get down to you and who you inherently are. But I think it goes a step further. And how do we know this world? We know this world through senses, through touch, through sight, through smell, through, the remaining other senses. But, so in this world, we assume that this is the physical world and it is the real world. But in a world that's built predominantly for sight and sound, like I don't have a sense of smell, but no one knows that until I say it. In a world where sight and sound is important, if you lose one of those senses, it's a completely different world. But in this world as well, it is fully artificially created. I see the technology as a metaphor for this world, where, we all live in square boxes. We look out our window, we've got square gardens. We walk down the street and there's a tree planted in a very specific place. You go to hang out in nature and you go to the park. None of that exists without man's input into the world. Yet we're constantly reacting and behaving accordingly to this already designed world. So there was a scientist in 1952 called Claude Shannon, and he made an artificial intelligent mouse, and he called it Thesis was the project, and the mouse was also called Thesis. And it shows the possibility of artificial intelligence at that point. It's an electronic mouse that it will navigate its way to a pre-designated target. Once completed, if it's placed anywhere on the maze again, it remembers the route and it will go back to that designated target. Now, it's a common misconception that the programmer of the artificial intelligence, of the mouse, the artificial intelligent mouse, is the autonomous one, because it isn't. It's the person who makes the maze and the person who puts the mouse on the maze. The freedom of Thesis is limited by what options are available to it within its situation, and so it acts accordingly to a set of pre-designated rules. Now, in the 21st century, how different are we to Thesis? We have the choice of which route we may take, but we never made the decision to actually endure this journey that is life. So, we're thrust into this world with our final destination already determined. You add in the few key milestones of school, marriage, children, retirement, grandchildren, and our life is looking more and more like Thesis. We had the freedom to make the decisions, but we never made the decision to actually live life. So that's kind of the physical sense of this. And obviously there's the the elephant in the room that we're not talking about, which is technology. So this is kind of just what I think about internet in a nutshell. And I only know very minimal about PHP kind of programming, so you guys probably know more about this than I do. But I've used democracy there in the opposite, ironically in the sense that I'm using in its definition opposite to dictatorship. Because I actually think the internet is the most capitalist thing that we've ever experienced. I think it is the capitalist dream. Any person, it's not regulated by governments, it's not really regulated by anyone. Any person can spend a small amount of money, can make a site, can do whatever they like there. As it gets bigger and bigger, you can data mine, you can advertise, you can start charging people, you can do whatever you like with it. Then you start to get a monopoly over stuff and you've kind of won. But then how do we hear about things? We hear about things through word of mouth, or we Google something. And then what we Google, it's up to Google's algorithm and Google's deciding thing what comes up. But also we don't really Google stuff, we Google stuff for work, or the mainstream kind of people. So it comes down to Facebook. So a recent study said 72% of 16 to 29-year-olds get their source of information from Facebook newsfeed. Now, what is Facebook's newsfeed? It's a tailored thing which is done to you, and it kind of works quite well. It knows you pretty well. But that algorithm is one thing. But where it's quite clever, I think, is it magnifies everyone to want to be a celebrity, and it kind of gives you a slight endorphin rush when it works very well, kind of thing. And it works well because people are jealous of us. People get jealous of the bits of our life that we're showing on there. Now, where it starts to get into a bit of a, I'd say, difficult tension is created, is where advertisers then start looking at your information, and they're going through what you've done, And they're basing what they're advertising not only on what you think is interesting, but because if I post lots of stuff on Facebook, and you post lots of stuff on Facebook, and no one looks at what I look at, but everyone looks at what you look at, you're more valuable than I am. So you shouldn't advertise to me because my breadth of people is 1, your breadth of people is 50, let's say. So you stop advertising to me and you start advertising to them. And then what you're advertising to them isn't purely what you would find interesting, it's what your friends would also find interesting. So then we get into this thing where you are no longer not only in control of what you're seeing anyway, but what you're seeing is what the advertiser is deciding, what Facebook are deciding, and what your friends' interests are. So you're losing more autonomy. But then you start to post some of the stuff that you're seeing, and because this is the way Facebook works, people like it, you get a sense of validation, and you're happy at this, so you carry on posting it. So your interests then start to be changed, but completely out of your control. So it kind of works in that sense as well as me posting information about myself and what I've been doing. So then it does it in the sense of I post stuff, but it works really well and whatever. I'm documenting my life and experiencing through that. But other people are sharing information about me. And that sharing of the information about me that I'm not choosing to do is where it really gets problematic because the sense of anonymity is going. And instead of getting really angry and upset, what happens is I get really happy because there's a little package of this notification for me to unwrap, and then I'm happy, you're happy, and Facebook's happy because more information is shared about you. So the reason for me talking about this and bringing it back to the project is this idea that we're sharing more and more information about ourselves. Where's this not playing? Me sharing this information, people sharing this information about me, instead of being upset, we're shifting to this point where we're not caring about privacy and we're losing anonymity. And I never speak about the other person who I'll be living as in this project. 1, because no one asked me, which I do find strange because I think he's more interesting than me for 28 days. But 2nd, because maybe I don't think I should. But this shift that we've seen in the digital age, this is my generation, so maybe I'm not really fair to speak on it. But it's constantly striving for validation, and that's all we ever really want, because we are quite insecure human beings as a race. And it's only through confirmation from others can we get the validation that we so desire and call ourselves happy. And that's by code of conduct decided by others. And when we adhere to these sets of rules, can we actually get the sense that we can be happy and are able to call ourselves happy. Now, this person that I'll be living as, all I can do for those 28 days, for 24 hours a day, is watch his life and observe his life. And of course I'm going to be judging him. There's no way that I'm not going to judge him when it's that long. So this validation he so desires, is it coming from him being selected? Is it coming from the public when they see bits of his life and they see that he went skydiving or went to a football match or is a really cool human being? Or is it by me watching his life? Or is it by me immersing myself into his life? And if I'm immersing myself into his life for long enough, I'm not going to be speaking to anyone for 3 days, 5 days, a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks. I'm going to start talking. And whenever you're in an intimate relationship or you're having dinner with someone or you're here right now, I will probably believe that I am there, momentarily at least. And what happens if over the course of the time that I start to believe that I'm him? Even if momentarily, what happens? Whose identity does that belong to? Is it his identity or is it my identity? One's mind is reality, but reality is the mind of the owners. And to paraphrase my favorite quote, when you die, you don't die. When you die, the world dies. And it's true, the world is our image. It's how we see certain stuff. It's shaped in our emotions, our feelings, our upbringing, our family, our environment, everything. So to ask, can we have a shared identity seems slightly silly. But, memories are forever altered and forgotten. They're fallible, fictional, and malleable, however we like. And we as a society are striving more and more and more towards this uploading certain information, but everything about our lives. And, it's kind of like that bit where you watch a film and you're just watching this protagonist's life, that whole thing. And those bits that don't quite make the cut are like the bits that we're not recording actually in real life. But the sense of striving for this ultimate validation can only come through the restraints of recognition. So what if we relinquish control of all of the restrictions? What if we break down the barriers of the virtual world into the physical world? Will our online identity override the physical identity? The initial promotions of the internet promised us individuality and anonymity, but now it's being replaced with conformity, where our idiosyncrasies are nothing more than endearing novelty. We're constantly aware of our actions being documented, so we act in a different way. When the prisoner doesn't know when he's being watched, he becomes his own guardian. But what happens when he does know that he's being watched, as the other does? This other person is performing for me, but then he is then censoring himself because I am the observer. But he is in control of me and what I'm thinking and what I'm doing. Who is in control of the other one? And we get into the cyclical thing where it doesn't matter which came first. We both came into this completely autonomously, or so we were led to believe that we were autonomous. And then suddenly, the true autonomy is taken away from us. So I bring you to the final line of the trailer that we started with. If our consciousness is experienced through the perception of sight and sound, through interaction, through technology, and through our conception of knowledge, to what extent is it really our own? Thank you.
Thanks.